Welcome to Podnutz, Computer Repair Podcast, episode number 199. I'm your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live call-in show for computer repair techs. We answer your questions on running and operating your computer repair business. Call-in number is 1-888-697-0162. The Computer Repair Podcast is brought to you by FreshBooks, the simple, pain-free invoicing solution for freelancers and small business owners. Try it free at freshbooks.com/Podnutz. Let me introduce the co-host. We have Marvin Bee from MB Systems. How you doing, Marvin?
I am doing Comcastic.
That's our word for today.
Yep.
Comcastic. All right.
And there will be much more explanation on that later.
Awesome. All right. Let's go ahead and let's start up with a good story or a tip that might help somebody out there.
Well, I'll start with a story and a tip.
Ooh, nice.
And it's just great because, as you know, I got a call just before we were starting the show today. I have basically, they're not my oldest client, but they're the one client that I made the mistake of giving him my cell phone. 17 years ago. And he's the only person in the firm that has it. So he'll call me every now and then, and they pay me a lot of money, and I will take care of him, whenever he calls.
Nice.
So he called because they apparently picked up a new client. And the new client is going to require them to show that they have security practices active, that they have a written policy. And they actually had been using a company that would do penetration testing for them, and found that they had somebody that had hacked their network and had stuck an actual Trojan 4 years ago that was still active. I don't know if it was last week or last month or whatever, but this is a company that actually goes out and does security testing and does all that. So he sent me the link and told me that he wanted me to look at it and thought it might be a good idea that his company start to do that. So the good news is that I could tell him I have no problem doing that. And as a matter of fact, we are already in the process of doing all of that for his company. His compliance officer or development officer, she does a whole lot of things for the firm. Because they're an insurance defense firm, their clients are the insurance companies, the big boys.
Okay.
Peyton Manning is retired, that type of company and stuff. And so they had already sent them a whole list of stuff that they wanted them to be in compliance with, have the written policy. So we're in the process of doing that already. So I was able to tell him we're already taking care of that. It's already going to be good to go. So he was very happy to hear that was being done. The bad news is that I told him you're going to have to be spending some money.
Oh,
because this is one of those firms that they don't want to spend the money unless they absolutely have to. And they didn't spend they had some backup, but not really good backup. No true disaster recovery. No login audits, no history. They have firewalls, but, they always fight me every year to keep them, with their subscriptions for the firewall, antivirus protection, intrusion prevention, and all that.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I've already, started to put together what it's going to cost them to just get up to date. Now, with this company coming in saying, you need to be more compliant, that's only going to basically, I don't know if it's going to get me more money, but it's definitely going to get them looking at a few more things to get their network, fully protected.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. And this will probably go into our subject a little bit later, but, taking care of those customers and helping them to do the things that they need to do. Now they're being forced by outside companies to be compliant, especially insurance. Insurance doesn't want to be responsible for anything. So they're going to make you be compliant to the point where Doesn't matter if you want to do it now. Now you have to do it. We've been telling them for years, but now now a third party is saying, no, got to do it or we're going to drop your insurance.
Well, it's not even that. These are their clients.
Oh, God.
So we're talking, millions of dollars in billable, time that they'll just lose. Those companies, insurance defense companies, they fight to get, a bulk load of cases from an insurance company, 20, 50, 100 cases a year. And if that company says we're taking our cases someplace else, that would be like a lot of us losing, 40, 50% of our business with one chunk.
Right. Exactly.
Except for them, it's millions of dollars.
Right.
For us, it's thousands.
Exactly. Yeah, big difference there. So no, it's good. I'm pretty sure that a lot of companies are going to start needing this type of protection, and they're going to step up the game because there has been a lot of things that are going on with the hacks. Because a lot of companies will look at things like hacking and go, "Oh, it'll never happen to us." And there's only two types of people out there in the world. There's those that have been hacked and those that haven't been hacked yet. But nobody is bulletproof. If anybody thinks you're bulletproof, again, what was that guy who did the Social Security number where they protect you, and he had the Social Security number on the side of the trucks, and basically was holding it out there. Well, if you can hack me, whatever.
Oh, yeah, that lock company. What was the name of that?
LifeLock or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember, he got hacked, and everybody's like going, "Well, yeah. I mean, if you're gonna dangle it out there for everybody to see, people are going to rise to the challenge."
Yep.
None of us are exempt. Well, very cool. Well, I tell you, I've got a short little story. It's not a real long one. My wife was in the dollar store, and she basically had come home, and she had almost picked me up a Fix Me stick. Just to, just kind of go, hey, do you know about this? And because we've talked about it before, where you see the Fix Me stick for $19.95, and you don't get one, you get two, because you would need two for what, I don't know what. But anyways, these things were in the dollar store. They were $1. I'm like, for $1, probably should have bought it so I could see exactly what's on there. Because I've never really looked to see what they're doing to miraculously fix your computer. A lot of the stories that I'm hearing lately are people talking about in this industry, people talking about their customers when you shoot out a price to them, whether it's an hourly rate or a flat rate fix for whatever the thing is. A lot of people are going, well, I can get my grandkid to do that. And it's like, okay, go ahead. Because the reality is, I think a lot of people think that they can just Google something or they can have their grandkids do it. And, people only know what they know. And even at a younger age, even though you might know a lot more than your parents before your grandparents, the reality is there's a lot that we do to protect our customer and make sure that things are done right. I love the customers. I just had a phone call, must have been yesterday. Somebody called me up and said, hey, I need a fan replaced in my laptop. I already have the fan. How much would you charge to replace it? And I know what's involved in most of the time taking fans apart or taking fans out of a laptop. It's usually none of them are, well, I shouldn't say none of them. Most of them are not easy enough to where you can just remove the bottom cover and pull the fan and heat sink off, or just the fan separately sometimes from the heat sink. A lot of them, you actually have to basically disassemble the whole thing to get to the other side of the motherboard to get one or maybe a handful of screws off in order to get that fan replaced. Plug it in, make sure it works, all that kind of stuff, right? And a lot of people don't realize what it really takes. So I shoot a price out. Yeah, I charge a flat rate for a lot of those fixes, $89. And I'll replace the fan. No big deal. You already got it. Hopefully it's the right one. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize. A lot of times when you look at just the manufacturer model number of your laptop, what you'll see is there are different fans depending on the specific unit, motherboard that laptop uses. And so there's a lot of times where I would rather pull a laptop apart in order to get the actual part number when I'm looking it up, because I can't tell you how many times I've done the model number on the laptop, ordered a part, and it was the wrong part.
Yep.
Could be a ribbon cable, could be whatever, right? And so those things are kind of frustrating where you go, yeah, okay, everybody wants to be a shade tree mechanic. And quite honestly, most people are not going to be all that good at it, because it can be frustrating if you haven't done something before. You know, I go back to some of my stories, replacing a power jack when you had to desolder and solder and all that kind of stuff. My first one took me 6 hours. And I can't tell you the handful of times that I've had people that have taken apart a laptop in order to fix it and bring me the laptop with screws and everything in a box and all the parts, and ask me, can you put this back together? And now the reason they end up bringing it to me, I know a lot of shops have a policy where, like, if you're bringing parts that have already taken apart, they're not going to touch it. They're like, no, you're on your own. But I will take the challenge because it's something I still enjoy doing as far as the hardware side. So I still do those things. But anyways, yeah, fix me stick for $1. So if she ends up back there, I might have her actually grab me one just to see what's on it.
That's a good thing to do.
Yeah. See what they're doing that's magically fixing that computer.
Yeah, well, you'll see what free software they've bundled in the stick to with automated scripts. You know,
exactly.
It's probably C cleaner,
right? And the thing is, and I've told people this before, and a lot of people may understand this or not understand it. When I get a computer of any sort, desktop, laptop, whatever, and I'm in the operating system, and I'm moving around and kind of seeing how things work, I have a good feeling for a computer that's actually working well versus one that's not. Now, most customers, they won't really care. They're like, hey, if you can get it to work a little bit better than what they're used to, instead of taking 5 minutes to boot up, it'll take 2. They're perfectly happy with that. When you're going like, are you kidding me? This thing should take like 30 to 45 seconds, even on a slower system, to boot up. And so I think a lot of people will, I guess their mileage will vary, and some people just put up with that stuff. I don't know. Just not for me. Anywho. All right. Any other stories before we move on? Any other tips?
I think we're going to have a lot of stories today.
All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and then we will get into our main topic. Since there's only 2 of us, it kind of moves ahead a little bit faster than normal, so that's all good. All right. Our show today is brought to you by FreshBooks. It is a simple cloud accounting solution designed for small business owners to painlessly send invoices, track time, and capture expenses. For most computer repair shops, it's the very thing that always seems to be in short supply. That's time. Tons to do and never enough time to get it all done. The good news is our friends over at FreshBooks feel your pain and have created something to help you reclaim some of your precious time and be more productive. FreshBooks has created an amazingly simple invoicing solution for small business owners who need to focus on their work and not on their paperwork. And the invoicing is only the beginning. FreshBooks keeps all your cash flow details in one place so you know exactly what invoices you sent, when you sent them, who's paid you, and who owes you what. Their mobile app lets you take pictures of your receipts and organize them for later, which makes claiming expenses at tax time a breeze. It only takes about 30 seconds to create a really professional looking invoice. FreshBooks can even show you whether or not a client has looked at the invoice you've emailed. You can call their helpful support line and you'll get to speak to a human right away. That's a win in my book any day of the week. No phone trees, no annoying pre-recorded messages. The best part is FreshBooks will definitely streamline how you manage this stuff on a day-to-day basis, but you'll also find that as tax time comes, you'll be so much more prepared and way less stressed. FreshBooks is offering you a free 30-day trial to try it out with no credit card required. Go to freshbooks.com/podnuts and enter Podnutz in the How Did You Hear About Us section. We want to thank FreshBooks for sponsoring this episode of the Computer Repair Podcast. All right. So our main topic for today, and this was brought in by Marvin Bee, and I thought it was so good that I figured we'd go into it. And the topic is, what do you really do when customers don't listen? We all fight the backup fight, and Marvin was just talking about that in his story, right? But what about everything else? And I'm not sure exactly where he's going with this, but he says, can life really be Comcastic? Do you want to explain yourself, Marvin?
Sure, I will explain myself. And basically, it's the same old story that all of us talk about. And I had it happen 2 days in a row. I had it happen Thursday, and I had it happen Friday.
Okay.
Thursday, I'm sitting in my office, and I'm getting ready to take care of some afternoon stuff, and I get a call from one of my not-for-profit companies. Now, I normally don't do not-for-profits. You've probably heard me say that. I have basically two that I've had. I've had one forever, and I just picked up another one because a former client of mine begged me to. Said that nobody can help them. But the original not-for-profit, it's just two people in the office. It's a nice pair of elderly ladies.
Okay.
That I was just able to get them sold on a backup product because they didn't have one before. So I got them on a monthly backup to their NAS and then to the cloud. So they've got that. I had been talking to them about their internet speed because they were on DSL. And, we had talked about them, maybe updating their speed. So the call comes in Thursday afternoon that Comcast just left and they can't open any of their files or print. And I said, what did Comcast do? They said, oh, well, they replaced our AT&T and they gave us faster internet. And I said, so they replaced the bot? And they said, yes. I said, okay. I'll be there in a couple hours. And then Friday, a law firm that we have been going round and round on stuff. And this is a firm, they have a server. They have multiple offices. And they, by now, should know, don't do stuff to the network without calling me.
You'd think they'd know.
The only way I found out that Comcast was there is I had put their router on one of my monitoring programs. I have SonicWall at that client. They're not a recurring income client for me yet. They're going to be at some point. But they had asked me to monitor some website activity and some bandwidth. So I threw them on my global monitoring system. And I just happened to get an alert that their router was down.
Ah, okay.
So I called because sometimes they have power issues. And I said, so did you lose power or is just your internet down? And the girl goes, well, our internet's down. I said, oh, okay, no problem. And she goes, yeah, but we kind of did that on purpose. I said, really? Kinda on purpose? Well, yeah, Comcast is here upgrading our speed. And they said the only way to get faster speed was to give us a new box. And I said, so you realize you're not going to be able to work and your Lakeland office won't be able to remote into their server. And she's like, yeah, we were kind of just realizing that. And we were trying to debate whether to call you or not because we knew you were going to yell at us.
Well, at least they knew that.
Yeah, trust me, they knew it. And one of the phrases she said, the attorney, is down on his knees begging your forgiveness.
Nice.
But, it's again, now I know a lot of us like to talk big a lot of times about what we do, when customers don't listen to us. And For the most part, I don't take on new clients if I get the sense that that's how they're going to be. If
Right.
they're going to make decisions on their own, if they want to shop on their own, buy their own stuff, that's really not who I want. But these are two cases where they're existing clients of mine. And the one client, for sure, they know better. Don't do anything without calling me first. At least so I can say, yes, it's okay for you to do that, or no, don't do it. I need to be involved.
Right.
So they know they're going to get a hefty bill because they're going to get, I don't even know what I call it. Basically, I bill them at a higher rate.
Okay.
When they do stuff after, and I have to come in after the fact and fix it.
Gotcha.
So, we know that, companies have convenience fees.
It's like an ID 10 fee, right?
Yeah, an ID 10 fee. So, but in terms of, I don't have that happen very often, but I know that a lot of guys do. And we'll probably start to see more of it. But in terms of what do you really do when clients don't listen? If clients don't want to get a backup, fine, sign this piece of paper that I'm not responsible if and when you lose data.
Right.
If a customer goes out and buys a computer without talking to me, I'm not going to come in and set it up.
Right.
And, it's just one of those things where I do have a couple of things that I'll, stand my ground on. But a lot of times, if it's not a huge, big deal, all right, I'll do it. I got to charge you extra. Don't do it again.
Right.
It's more like a slap on the wrist. But at some point, we're going to have to really start getting, a bit mean about this.
Well, and I think what I've seen from a lot of different people is that, and here's my take on it. You can absolutely do whatever you want to do in your business. And as long as I'm willing to support it that way, that's fine. But here's the problem. And here's what I see from most businesses out there. What they'll do is customer won't listen to the basic things that they need. And then when the customer goes down, that business owner or technician will bend over backwards and run around like a chicken with their head cut off to go and support them. That's where I'm in a disagreement with how some people do their business. And the reason I say that is, hey, businesses can do whatever they want to do. And if you're willing to support that, like I said, that's fine. But I'm also at the same time, when an emergency comes up, it's not an emergency to me whatsoever. I will get to it when I have the time. And especially if they're not a recurring client. But even if they were a recurring client, and I'm responsible for all this stuff, and they bring a new computer in the network or something, or have Comcast come in without me being there, without notifying me, those things, yeah, will I still support them? Sure. But it's not an emergency. So that's the way I look at it.
Well, you're probably in a situation where you can do that. I have situations where it doesn't matter if it's, something I did or something they did. If they're down, they're down. And if we're talking, 180 people, in an offices that can't work, it's a pain. I mean, I just had a situation on Tuesday, where let me try to phrase this so that it doesn't sound as bad as it sounds. A tech called me up to say that he foobarred the network.
Okay.
And deleted an organizational unit out of group policy, out of their Active Directory.
Okay.
So for those that don't know, group policy is where you can set up security groups, distribution groups, and you can apply policies across the network. Everything from what permissions they have on the network, what servers they can connect to. And in this case, they were organizational units assigned to not only distribution groups, because there's actually 8 different offices. There's attorneys, paralegals, staff assigned that way, but they're also tied to how they get their Outlook signatures, what drives that they are able to connect to on the network. There's policies set up as to who can actually connect to the remote server. So deleting this organizational unit basically deleted 55 groups.
Oh my gosh.
And for people that were connected to the remote server, if they didn't log off, they were fine. But if they logged off, they couldn't get back on.
Oh.
And all of a sudden, they couldn't send and receive mail to their internal groups. The accounting department couldn't connect to their accounting drive. I mean, stuff like that. So, it was the on-site tech that did it. He said he did it. At that point, there's no sense in yelling at him. Basically, my morning was screwed. So I spent, 4 hours helping them. We tried to recover it first, but couldn't do it. But then we spent the rest of the time recreating the groups.
Wow. So there was no backup for that then?
No, because, again, the proper way to back up, they didn't want to do. And it's a long story because some people are going to go, well, how do you not do a system state backup, or how do you not do? The problem is it's a firm that's been in existence. They haven't upgraded stuff. They're running out of space, and it's a matter of what can you back up versus, how much is it going to cost us to get a proper backup?
Okay.
So all of that stuff was in play. And there's a whole thing about, in theory, every organizational unit in a Active Directory, there's a box in there that says prevent this from being accidentally deleted.
Okay.
Most of the time that's checked. For whatever reason, this wasn't checked.
Interesting.
Now, in my 20 plus years of doing network support, I've never had anybody
uncheck that box.
Well, not even uncheck it, but I've never had an OU deleted like that. I've had, some users deleted.
Okay.
Or maybe if you're setting up a group and the group doesn't do what you want, then you delete the group, but never an entire OU with that many groups. So, but that's an example of, I can't really yell at them for, because it's not like I told them, hey, don't do this.
Right.
But when you made the comment about, their emergency is not your emergency, in that particular case, that's my, that becomes my emergency.
Well, and that was, like you said, though, that was an on-site tech that actually made a mistake. It wasn't like he purposely did something.
Right.
And then he contacted you to let you know, here's what I did. I'm sorry. And so, yes, in that particular case, I think you do need to do what you need to do. But again, I look at it, it took you 4 hours to rebuild those groups, the group policies. And that was time that, maybe some people couldn't work or do something. And hopefully that will show them in the future that they actually need to change something in their policy and have a better backup system in place and be willing to pay for that,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough. I think in this business, like any other business, I think you play everything by what happens with a particular client or customer. And not everything is going to be, in other words, it's great to have all these policies and different things in place. But the reality is, I don't know that we always follow every policy that we put in place for all of our customers. Sometimes we'll change those depending on the situation. Now, fortunately, obviously, in this particular case, you didn't have another larger customer that was down at the same time that you needed to be handling, because had you been, you might not have been able to get to that other customer and rebuild those group policies. So it would have been okay, who's coming first?
Right.
Unfortunately, you weren't in that position. So you were able to drop whatever it is you were doing and handle that particular situation. So that makes sense.
Yep.
I don't know how to better tell the customer, here's really what you need, because the reality is most of the time emergencies don't really happen, right? For most people. It's just that that if one little emergency does happen, one little thing falls apart, you're going to have something in place that you can mitigate the problem and get them back up and running in a short period of time versus, yeah, we'll get you back up and running. Yeah, maybe sometime today, maybe sometime tomorrow. I'm not really sure. We'll see what we can do. But Marvin, and let me ask you this, because this brings up a good point. If this particular whatever had happened, and let's say it was going to take you 18 hours to fix whatever the problem was, would you have stayed up all night through the night to make sure that this got taken care of? Or would you have said, you know what, I'm going to work on it so much today, and then tomorrow I'll pick up where I left off, and this is just the way it is?
Well, like everything else, it depends on the client.
Okay.
And it depends on what the problem is. Because there are some situations where, you know what, everything comes to a halt and this is all we work on.
Okay.
But there are situations where I have been, able to tell the client, well, I can do this much for the next hour, and then I've got other stuff that I've already scheduled, and the rest is going to have to wait. So it does depend on the client and the situation. And there have been times where, I don't stay up all night anymore, but I've pretty much stayed up till 12, and that's pretty much where I draw the line. I'll be like, you know what, if I need to get some sleep, I'm not working past midnight on any problem.
Okay.
Unless the server's on fire or something like that.
Sure. And even in situations like that, unless you have like something that's a bare metal restore, right? If you had a server that was just the server itself, the physical unit actually crashed, the hardware, and you needed to actually replace the whole server for whatever reason, that's still going to take time too.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've done that where back when I had my techs, I had a tech on site working on a server, and I'll use the earlier word, he foobarred the server. And basically they were down.
Right.
And I don't remember the time. It was probably like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And my tech isn't a server tech.
Okay.
He was never, but I don't remember why he was working on it. I think he was just installing some software. But bottom line is that ruined my day, where I was, I canceled whatever appointment I had, drove over to the client place, made him go do another job. And I think I was there till 11 o'clock rebuilding their server on site to get them back up and running. Now, thank goodness I didn't have to replace a part, or, I didn't have to rebuild the server from scratch, or else it would have been, I'd have just showed up at 5 o'clock, said, okay, I got to take your server. I'll get it back when I can.
Okay.
And, I hope I never have to say that, but, what else can you do? I mean, you got to order parts. So it takes 1 or 2 days for the parts to come in. You got to rebuild. You got to see where you are with the backup, if you've got a backup.
Right.
So
those are the situations that I see a lot of people going nuts over little things that people sometimes do. And they're like, well, they didn't follow my policies. They didn't follow what I put in place. But I still feel guilty, and I need to get them up and running because they're, down, and it's costing them whatever the number is, which I'm sorry, but working in the auto industry, I can tell you it's all baloney. Those hours dollars per hour. Yeah, whatever. It's you grab some Monopoly money and start throwing it out on the table, because that's really all it means. But to those people, and to bean counters everywhere, they will think that is what that is what they're losing. And it's like, no, you're not. But okay. On paper, yes, and your losses and all that kind of stuff, yes, you're going to put that stuff in place. I get that, because that's the way business is in America. But so anyways.
Well, here's the one thing I would say, if there are techs that are doing stuff because they feel guilty, there's absolutely no reason to feel guilty unless it's your fault.
Right.
If you've put a backup in place and the backup fails, and you were supposed to be watching it or monitoring it, and it's, been failing for 2 months and you didn't fix it, Well, that's a whole different thing. You should feel guilty and responsible for getting it up. But if it's something where, if it's just, an act of nature, you know,
Right.
or here's a perfect example. I had a customer in Orlando call me up one Monday morning, couldn't connect to anything, and were in a panic. And so I had them, go into the go into the server room, tell me what it is. Oh, well, okay, everything's off. Okay, well, you must have had a power outage. Let's go in and turn everything on. Oh, wait, there's more.
There
All
always
the
is.
cables, we're talking power cables, network cables, everything had been pulled out of the wall.
Why?
Somebody had gotten into their building. Now, this was an office building. We're talking a, professional 10, 15-story building, and somebody had gotten in there. They had security in the building, but somebody had gotten into their floor, gotten into their suite, gotten into their server room, which was not locked, and just simply unplugged everything from the wall.
Wow. Wow.
So I called a buddy of mine who was close by, asked him when he could get over there, and he couldn't get there right that morning. And they, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, I can't help you. That's that's not my problem. That your building let somebody get in, and for some reason got into your suite. I'm not responsible for the locks on your doors.
Right.
Now I can guarantee you now that server room is locked.
Right.
And they've got a different security system for their own suite inside that building, so that even if, somebody gets in again, they're not going to get into their suite. And if they do get into their suite, they're not going to get into their server room.
Right. That's a good point. I think a lot of people don't. Again, had that stuff been thought of ahead of time. But again, a lot of people think it will never happen to me.
Well, that's the thing. We're in a building, we got security, we're good.
Right.
And they're in another city, so it's not like I can just pop in every now and then and say, hey, why is your door open?
But because I've heard a lot of people say this, and I've seen it time and time again too. Why in the world is a server room not locked in any building, period? Why are most of them you can walk into, they're wide open?
Well, it's not even that. How many people actually have server rooms?
True.
Because I've got several clients. I mean, I've got several clients where, there's no place to even make a server room. So I have to, and again, that's something where, if I had my choice, there'd always be a server room. There'd always be a lock on the door. But I can't dictate, how they do their office. I would love to. And, for customers that move, I take that as an opportunity to say, okay, look, now that you're moving, let's look at all this stuff that you should consider.
Well, I think there's another thing too, though. Even outside of that, let's say you didn't have a server room per se, but you can still get a locking type of cabinet and say, okay, we're going to put all this stuff in here. We're going to lock this up because nobody needs direct access to this. Now, could somebody break the doors and get in? Sure, they could, but they'd have to go through some effort. In other words, a lot of times, listen, we lock our cars, we lock our homes, not really to stop people from getting in. It's a barrier to entry, because if somebody really wanted in either one of those things, they would get in, right? But we kind of give it as a deterrent for people that are not that determined to get in.
But there's, going back to our question, what do you really do to customers who don't listen? Obviously, there's a lot of places where, we have to just kind of accept it is what it is.
Right.
If you're not going to lock up your stuff, now I haven't gone so far as to say, sign this waiver, I'm not responsible. But I know a lot of large companies that they are like that. They're like, look, if you're not going to do this, and this, we're not supporting you.
Right.
So, I don't know that I could ever be like that. Well, I could.
Right. Exactly. I think you could, from the standpoint of those companies have said, okay, this is our clientele and here's who fits our client base. Anything outside of that, we're not going to support because it's outside of what we do. In other words, they're not going to drop one thing to move to another. They're going to go, we already know everything that's in place and we already know how to fix it. Because again, it's a form of standardization, right? Where you're not having to make things up on the fly because everybody's a little bit different.
It's that. And then it's also, putting some sort of penalty in place for things that can be controlled. For instance, the people that decided to change out their Comcast, without talking to me. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to, enforce that as much as possible, but you know what? You got to pay me more to come fix it.
Right.
So to some degree, that penalty of paying more, should deter them from, doing it again. Where I can say, look, if you'd have called me the first time, it would have cost you half as much.
Okay.
Because what's the reason they always say? Well, we didn't want to call you. We were trying to save some money or whatever. Well, now you spent twice as much as you may have if you just called me in the beginning. I'd have been here, taken half an hour, got everything up. So, now it costs you twice as much, and you were down.
And that goes back to the question too. What is more important, time or money? I mean, really, if you were to ask a business that question right there, what's more important, time or money? They would say time, because time for whatever they're doing is billable. When they're down and they can't do certain things, well, they're not making the money, or because you're spending money for employees or whatever to sit there and not be able to do their jobs. Now you're behind. So again, I think coming from that standpoint, if you let your businesses know, hey, listen, really, if you think about it, ask that question, they're going to say time. And you go, okay, here's things we can put in place so you don't ever lose this time. Money's always replaced by the things that you sell or make or service. That money's always coming in. You can always increase that. But here's what when you lose something, you can't necessarily get it back. You're playing catch up all the time.
Right. So, I guess it's going to be something where, you made the comment earlier in the show that, your neighbor's kids or your grandkids or somebody else, they know somebody who can do this. Now, for the residential customers, that's always going to be a problem. I think it's going to get worse. Google is going, is everybody's best friend now. Now for businesses, one of the things that I like to do is I like to basically tell them the stuff that I do for you, you can't find on Google.
Nice.
Okay. Setting up these, we're not using a router that you just bought off the shelf at the box store.
Right.
That just anybody can set up. You don't want stuff that just anybody can set up. You want to be, you want to have much more protection. Because if we put in just a cheap router that anybody can mess with, then anybody's just going to, you'll just go from tech to tech to tech. They'll just reset stuff all the time. But if you put in a router that not every tech knows, well, there's at least a little bit of protection there, and you're going to value, that a little bit more.
It's funny. The reason I laugh when you say that is anybody can set up is 99.9% of the time I've seen these things set up by somebody else, whether it be an adult or a child, that are set up wrong, even from a residential standpoint. I'm like, yeah, here's why this thing don't work. Because quite honestly, if you're smart enough to go in even a residential router nowadays and understand all the menus and the trees to get to where you need to get to and do the things you need to do, you're a smarter person than I am. Because I look at that stuff and my eyes glaze over and I go, what does this mean? I've been doing this stuff for a long time, and this stuff don't even make sense to me. Who came up with this? Well, I'll tell you who came up with it. Some engineer that designed that router and thought it would be a good idea. That's who came up with it. And router manufacturers just manufacture it because they know, and that's why you never see firmware updated and all that kind of stuff. It's like whatever you get, it's good for a couple years, then you just throw it out and replace it. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I don't. And again, I mean, I don't ever get real low end routers. Maybe some of the lower end ones are a little easier to understand, but all the ones I've seen, they all call something. Their menus are all different. They use words I don't understand, and it means something. I know what it does once I figure out what the word is, because one manufacturer calls it this, one manufacturer calls it that. So yeah, what I see is a lot of people screwing things up, and again, I think even from the business, because I've seen it in businesses too, where the owner or somebody on staff will actually be their IT department, and they'll screw things up. And it's like, it's not until they absolutely can't work that it becomes a problem and they call one of us. But the reality is, you look at how they work and you go, how do you do this on a day-to-day basis? Because it doesn't work as well as it could, but that's just what they're used to.
Right.
People are used to that substandard way of living for whatever reason, because they save themselves a few dollars. So it doesn't make any sense to me. Again, let me go and I'm going to get brakes done on my car, and I'm just going to go take that to some 16-year-old down the street and hope they do it right. Oh, man. Anyways.
Well, the car is probably not the best example. The best example is home repairs.
Yeah.
I'll just run down to, the store and grab this pipe to replace this broken one in my plumbing.
Right.
Because I saw them do it on TV and it looks pretty easy.
Right. Exactly. Till you get into it and you're going back to the store 4 or 5 times. And then again, you spent all this time and effort on doing that when somebody could have come out and done that job in most of the time a half hour to an hour, and been in and out. Your problem's fixed and you're on your way, versus the 18 hours you spend actually doing it yourself.
Right.
I think that, and again, if your time's worth absolutely nothing, and this goes to businesses, but if your time's worth absolutely nothing, then hey, go for it, man. Shade tree mechanics are still alive somewhere.
Yep.
I know you say this all the time with law offices. They're making so many billable hours by all the cases and different things that are coming in all the time. Why would you ever want to put a cork in the flow of what's coming in? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But again, it goes back to, it's almost like insurance. We don't get insurance because we think we're going to be in an automobile accident or we think our house is going to burn down. We get it in case those things happen. Now, most of us in our lifetime will never use a penny of the insurance money that we spend on a monthly basis. We'll never get anything from it. We've paid for, Joe and Sally's house down the street that burned down. But the chances are you're generally never going to have to use that extra money. So, but you have it there just in case you do.
Yeah, but you know what? Here's how I think of it. Most people only have car insurance because the law says so.
True.
And a lot of people that have homes only have homeowners insurance because their mortgage company says they have to have it.
True.
So when you leave it up to them to make their choice, most people are going to say no, which is the same battle we face all the time with, you need backup. Well, how much does it cost? No, I can spend that $100 a month on a nice meal each month. I'll just, and that's what it is. So unless we get to a point where we're, they respect us in the same vein as everybody else, where we say, you're not going to get support unless you have this, they're not going to do it.
And I think a lot of people are concerned because most businesses I know out there, the reason I say they bend over backwards is because if they were to actually stand up and do that, a lot of their revenue they feel would be gone, and they don't want to take that chance. So
That's probably true. That's probably true.
It's hard, and I think you have to go with your gut on it. But I think it's going to go on a case by case basis is the best way I can put it, because we all make compromises of some sort or another. But you can see why some of these larger companies, some of these larger MSPs and stuff like that will basically go, here's our standardized system. Here's what it costs. If you're not willing to spend that, we're not going to support you. We'll move on to somebody else. So, but at the same time too, I think sometimes I've seen companies that have backpedaled on that too, because they've gone, whoa, wait a minute. Our revenue is shrinking and we need to boost it up a little bit. And there's only so many businesses to go around. So I'm sure that those companies will make their compromises also.
Well, I think also it depends on the level of responsibility you're taking for the network. So for the networks where, it's my responsibility, meaning I'm the only tech that goes in and plays with them, my company or whatever, I can have those demands more in place. For the companies I support that, they may have a tech on site and I'm just kind of there, I can't impose those demands on them as much, like the law firm that doesn't have the backup they need. They're not technically my sole responsibility.
Right.
If they were, then I could come in and say a lot more. You need to do this. I can't support you this way. Well, right now their response is going to be, well, we don't need you to. We got our own guy.
Right. That's true.
So, that's true. But for the companies where, and like I said, the both of these Comcastic companies that called me Thursday and Friday, they're not my full-time customer. I probably hear from them, every so often. So, if they were to come to me and say, hey, we want you to take care of our stuff full time, then I can come in with my list. Okay, here's what we got to do that.
Gotcha.
So, for, and that's where you're right, case by case basis for situations, or, for techs that don't want to lose that income, I guess.
Right. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having that conversation. Let's say the company is not going to do what you would like them to do right now to protect them the best way that you could. You can bring this up every 3 months, 6 months, year. If you're supporting them on an ongoing basis, to go, listen, here's what you really need to do. And I'm putting this out here because I've seen people get hacked. I've seen these things happen, and not from a scare tactic, but just a understanding of, I think if you have the conversation over and over again, maybe at some point you might get somebody to think a little differently, and they go, revenue's doing pretty good, and maybe we need to spend a little bit more money. Or what I've heard a lot of people say is, I think I've heard you say this before, when you're having that conversation, you can go, you know what, let's go ahead and put together a budget over the next year. And maybe we don't start this year, maybe we start the year after that, but we're going to put a budget together so that you can start putting X amount of money aside, so it's not this big chunk all at once. And again, it's just the education, getting them to think a little bit differently. And, and it's, a lot of people look at it, well, they don't want to do it, whatever. I don't want to badger them. But the reality is, if you're in the business to be able to protect the customer, you're not really badgering them. You're just letting them know what's available.
Well, it depends on, too, if, I've got a medical center that, claims they want to be HIPAA compliant.
Doesn't every medical center.
And, basically the conversation every so often that I have with them comes down to, okay, if you want to be HIPAA compliant, then this is what you got to do. And then they, sometimes they say yes to this, but no to this. But what I've been doing now is I've gotten a couple of HIPAA, subscriptions, or, medical subscriptions that they will give us, monthly updates on what's happening in the world of HIPAA.
Okay.
So basically now what I've done is I just go to them with an article, like the last one I did, actually had 2 stories about hospitals that got fined
Ooh,
because of
nice.
HIPAA breaches. So all I do now is take that to them and say, okay, you want to be HIPAA compliant. Here's what happened if you're not. So what do we got to do to get you there? So we've got that plan in place where we're doing this year. We're going to do that. So that may have been where you heard that from me, is that we're putting those steps in place. Can't do everything now, but it's in motion.
Exactly.
And a lot of businesses don't have those things where they're not in a position where they're going to be fined if they don't do it. I think the law firms are going to be in that situation where they may not be fined, but we're going to pull 100 cases from you if you don't do this.
Right. Okay.
Oh, guess we better do it now.
Right. When it starts to directly affect your pocketbook, obviously businesses are going to make different decisions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think again, we've talked about it before, and it comes back to the education factor, and we need to educate in a proper way to help the clients out if we are in fact supporting them to basically help them and also make money at the same time. It's a win-win situation, and that's, in my opinion, that's the way everything should be looked at. It's a win because I get paid to do this. It's a win for you because you're better protected than you would be if we just kind of did it on my emergency rate or when things blow up and we come in and save the day.
Right.
All right. Well, that was good conversation. I think there's a lot that we could all learn from and definitely do over time. So just some things to think about, definitely. All right, so let's go ahead and let's see. We're doing a giveaway. That's our second thing I want to talk about. And we're moving the draw date to October 9th. I think we were doing on October 7th or 2nd, but I wasn't able to do a show last week. So what we're going to do is I wanted to do 4 of these shows and give you guys the opportunity. We only have 6 entries so far. So Marketela from multivisions.com is giving away 5 MCSoft anti-malware licenses. Like I said, we'll be doing a drawing on October 9th, 2016. Send me an email with the subject line MCSoft giveaway. In the body of the message, put your name, the name of your business, and a topic you would like talked about on the show, and send it to Podnutz at podnutz.com. And you will be entered in the drawing for one of those licenses. So again, 5 MCSoft anti-malware licenses given away. So, and we're not putting anything in the show notes. So if you hear it on the show, then you'll know. If not, then you won't. So you have that. All right. So let's see. All right. Let's go ahead, and I think what we'll do is we've got a couple emails, and we'll go ahead and open up the phone lines. If you guys have any comments, questions, or anything like that, the call-in number is 1-888-697-0162. All right. All right. Here is a follow-up email from last week from a couple weeks ago when we were talking about do you need business customers? All right. All right. So, hey guys, I am on my 4th year of my business. I am a break fix tech. When I first started out, it was actually small business that kicked me off and kept me busy. I was lucky enough to get one company that was just starting out and setting up with all new equipment, and another small one that was expanding their equipment. After I accumulated a few more small businesses, I reached a point where I realized that because I am a one-man business, that if I have one day where more than one of these businesses has a critical issue or they all go down, I am in serious trouble and would have some very upset people. I'm not a bite as much as you can and chew person. The problem which I was up against is that as much as I was happy or would prefer to be only a residential fixed person, it takes a long time to build up enough of a home user base where you can get enough issues happening to keep you going. So I still need a few businesses to keep a consistency of work. Medical practitioners are something I have found to be good. They're not sale critical to their PC, but they do need them fixed pretty quickly and have the budget to do so without cutting corners. In the end, it is the advertising which I found to be the biggest killer to my staying alive as a business. It's a lot of money to spend if you don't get results. I pretty much rely on local Facebook groups for advertising and word of mouth now, and at the moment, it's working for me. I've learned so much from your podcast and have become a tougher business person through listening. Keep up the great work. Kind regards, Tony Roberts from Tony's Tech Help. Appreciate the email and follow up, Tony. And I think he's written in a couple times before. Yeah, I think it's always good to have. I've never said that you need to have residential only. I think you can build a business up like that, but I think Tony has a good and valid point, is that it takes a while to build up that clientele. So it is nice to have a few small businesses, whatever you're able to take care of as a one-person show, unless you're Superman like Marvin is and can just take care of all these big businesses. Most of us, we got to deal with usually 10 and below. Sometimes we can go a little higher than that, but or we can learn from Marvin. But yeah, I think there's a lot to that. Building up your clientele over time and being able to take care of it. It all depends on what you like to do too. A lot of people, they kind of like the break fix work of it's one at a time, right? And it's different issues. You're not necessarily having to support somebody's network. You're fixing their hardware, software. Maybe some people just enjoy doing that versus having to go in and, hey, our network's down and this is an emergency and now my heart's going 100 miles an hour and I need to take care of this. So I'm glad you're becoming a tougher business person, though. Don't give it all away. Don't give it all away. What do you think with that? Would you agree, Marvin? I know you've gone back and forth a little bit on. You've had both, so.
Yeah, I've had both, and I think that the one thing he mentioned about what do you do if more than one company has an emergency, and you just whichever emergency you can get to first is what you handle. I think that if you're upfront with the customers,
right,
and I think most of them are kind of okay with it if it's something where you can get back to them the same day, or if it's in the afternoon, you can get to them first thing in the morning, that sort of a thing. I guess I'm always faced with that because down here we always have the thought of a hurricane or a major storm, and in that sense, all of my customers could be down at the same time, and then it's a matter of who do you get to first. And I basically tell everybody it's the same as the emergency medical people and the first responders. They get to whoever they can get to.
Right.
And to some degree, you go after what I used to tell people is, I go after, what I can get up the fastest and what I can get up that affects the most people. In which case was if you had a server, then you had a very good chance of being, early in that process. And, my larger customers come first, and then it's just kind of down the road from there. So, I haven't had an issue with customers really, being upset with that. Again, I've had techs at times. I've got other technicians that can help me out if I need that help. But again, if we had a big hurricane come through, we'd all be in the same situation. So guess I don't know how that would be. Guess I'd find out pretty quick who wants to stay my customers or not.
Right. Yeah. No, I think it comes down to communication too, is, making sure that you're communicating with those customers so that they don't feel like they're just left out in the dark. A lot of times we're handling situations, we're handling things that we need to do, and we're doing them in an order. And I think as long as you're, like you said, you're upfront and honest with them, it shouldn't be an issue for most businesses, and they understand. hey, not everything's fixed immediately and right away. You know, whether you know whether you're one person or you have a shop full of techs, you still can only support so much
Right.
before it all kind of blows up. So, oh, okay. Well, I think that was our last email for the day.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got another one that I was going to bring up, but I think we're actually a couple of show topics. People have been sending the people that have been sending things in to get involved in the MC Soft giveaway are giving some good show topics, and Marvin's coming up with some good ones too. So we will have plenty to talk about over the next few weeks. But I think since there's only two of us, we've kind of gone through everything. I think we're going to go ahead and end the show early, and we'll move on from there. But and we'll definitely be back next week and talk about some more exciting stuff. So Marvin, if people want to find you, where could they find you at?
My website, mbsystems.net, and all my contact information is there, including my link to the Facebook and the Google, the Google Plus, right?
Awesome. All right, come join us live for the Computer Repair Podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern over at podnutz.com/Computer Repair Podcast Live. Join in on the conversation by calling in live and hanging out in the chat room. We also have audio available over at podnutz.com or subscribe using your favorite podcatcher. You can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, Computer Repair Podcast. Send your questions and feedback to podnutz@podnutz.com. If you want to leave a voicemail, you can do that at 1-888-697-0162. Please consider supporting this show by going to patreon.com/Computer Repair Podcast. We appreciate all that do. I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on Podnutz, the Computer Repair Podcast.